2nd of June 2010, on a glorious summer's day in a beautiful, rural, friendly part of the UK, 13 people were killed in the space of a few hours. All 13 victims were killed with firearms spread over a 20-mile stretch of the coastal region of Cumbria, starting near Whitehaven, then travelling southward towards Seascale. I have visited Cumbria 4 times now, carrying out my own independent investigations into these events, and I've spoken to many first-hand witnesses who saw what took place. I've also looked at the small amount of CCTV evidence available, and I probably now know more about these events than anyone other than those who have seen the official police files. This film will present my findings of these investigations, and it is intended to show that the case needs to be reinvestigated, because this film will demonstrate that it is not clear exactly who was responsible for all of these murders. Many questions still need to be answered. I am happy for people to send me their own evidence, and I am happy to be corrected on information put forward in this film, as long as that evidence is well founded and not an attempt to divert from the truth. According to the mainstream media, and according to the verdict of an official inquest, all of these murders were carried out by one single gunman, acting completely independently. He was 52-year-old taxi driver Derrick Bird. At this point, those of you familiar with this case might be listening to what I am saying in absolute disbelief. If you are, I would like to ask you to consider these questions. What evidence have you personally seen that proves to you that Derrick Bird killed all 12 of the victims? Have you seen conclusive proof derived from each of the 24 separate shooting locations that show it was Derrick Bird acting alone who fired every single bullet? If you have seen such proof, then please say what it is out loud now. I can help you out with these questions. The only evidence available in the public domain is a handful of media statements from witnesses who say they knew Derrick Bird and say they saw Derrick Bird in Whitehaven at just 3 of the 24 locations where bullets were fired. At the remaining 21 locations where bullets were fired, all of which were outside Whitehaven, people described seeing a gunman. But none of these witnesses knew Derrick Bird, and none gave detailed facial descriptions of what the gunman looked like to the media. From speaking to many of these witnesses, I have discovered that not only did they not describe the gunman in their media statements, but they were not asked by the police to describe the gunman's facial features in their police witness statements either. It seems that because a small handful of witnesses who knew Derrick Bird claimed they saw Derrick Bird in Whitehaven at 3 out of the 24 shooting locations, it was assumed that the gunman must therefore have been Derrick Bird at the remaining 21 locations. We cannot assume that Derrick Bird was present at the remaining 21 locations if no witnesses described what the gunman looked like. History tells us there is often a lot more to lone gunman incidents than what is immediately apparent, and we must not fall into the trap of making gross assumptions if we are going to get to the truth. As I mentioned, 3 of the 24 shooting locations were situated in the busy town of Whitehaven, and 2 of these locations were captured on CCTV. But why have I not been able to find any images which clearly show Derrick Bird with a gun in his hand in Whitehaven, or anywhere else that day? I repeat, I cannot find a single clear image in the public domain showing Derrick Bird with a gun in his hand. Now that I have explained that not enough evidence has been made available to the public to demonstrate what happened, I'm going to take you on a journey which explains my findings about this mystery, and in doing so highlight the many questions which still remain that could point to something entirely different to the official story. The golden rule about finding the truth in any investigation is to ask the right questions, but most importantly, in the right order. This might seem obvious, but almost everyone has fallen into the trap of not doing this in the Cumbria massacre case. The questions which should be answered strictly in this order are: what happened, how did it happen, who was responsible, and why did they do it? The schoolboy howler error that most have fallen into with this case is to jump to the 4th question before they have even addressed the first question. This isn't surprising because mainstream media have been attempting to explain why the alleged perpetrator carried out these murders from day one, before any detailed investigation was carried out. But more on mainstream media later. The most common motive that people will automatically quote you in this case is that Derrick Bird was up to his eyes in debt. This is completely untrue. It was revealed at the official inquest that Bird had £22,000 in savings and did not owe the Inland Revenue a penny, as people have claimed. His net earnings were around £6,000 a year, and he was therefore on tax credits and not liable for any income tax, nor were the Inland Revenue chasing him for any income tax. Looking at motives before you have established what happened is destined to give you the wrong answer. So I will tackle motives much later in the film, after I've examined evidence. Before I go into detail on that evidence, there are some important points that everyone should know about past lone gunman incidents. There are dozens of lone gunman cases, and many have turned out to be more complex than immediately reported. Let's mention just 3 high-profile shooting incidents that were initially reported as lone gunman assassinations: the JFK assassination, the Bobby Kennedy assassination, and the John Lennon assassination. I advise you carry out your own research, but I would argue that in all these cases the gunmen were in fact patsies. A patsy is a person who is easily taken advantage of, especially by being cheated or blamed for something. The real perpetrators responsible for the murders in these cases were most likely not the person who was charged. They were manipulated through various means to be at the right place at the right time with a gun in their hand. In both Kennedy assassinations, it is now reasonably well established that neither of these gunmen fired the shots which actually killed the victims. This is not conspiracy theory, it has been established by evidence-based research. In his book, Who Killed John Lennon?, Frenton Bresler presents evidence that the former Beatles' death was not the work of a lone nut, but that Mark David Chapman was a CIA asset, and that the CIA itself, or a faction within it, was behind the assassination of John Lennon.
Mark Chapman is the famous case. He was literally in a trance state when the police arrested him. He was here, and John Lennon appears to have been hit from bullets from the other side. So in that case, I believe that Mark Chapman was too a patsy that was just basically his job was to stand there and play the role of the aggressor.
Sirhan Sirhan, the alleged killer of Bobby Kennedy, was said to have been in a trance-like state during and after the shooting. Later, Sirhan would state strongly that he did not actually remember anything that happened during the shooting, but everyone said he did it, so he must have done it.
Well, I mean, he was examined by some very prominent hypnotists afterwards, and they all concluded that he was actually in a hypnotic trance when he during the assassination attempts. I mean, other clues were the fact that there were 14 bullet holes, and his gun only actually held 8 bullets. What the suggestion is that more recently he's sort of had remembrances, and he thought that he was at a shooting range, so he was actually going through something quite mundane, lifted his gun and thought he was shooting at a target. The suggestion is that actually his gun actually only held blanks, and he was like the distraction, like a fishing lure or something. Like, you're looking over here, and then the actual, I believe in the Kennedy assassination, the actual gunman was stood directly behind him.
Control of a patsy using hypnosis is a tool that is alleged to have been used in lone gunman incidents on many occasions.
George Estabrook, for one, basically said that I can hypnotise any man, and I can, within the space of a very short time, make him commit treason, murder or suicide, and create the scenario whereby he will not even know that he's been hypnotised. J.G. Watkins, in a very short time, hypnotised soldiers to attack superior officers, believing them to be enemy agents.
Before we look at the events of the 2nd of June 2010, we'll get some background into the kind of person Derrick Bird was from people who knew him.
He was a quiet person, but a nice guy.
He's a nice guy, he's a pleasant guy.
He had a very nice temperament, and he was always very charming.
From a decent family, and in a decent and very beautiful neighbourhood.
A family man.
You know, if you had a child, Derrick, can you just look after this? We will last for an hour because I've got a crisis, yeah?
Yeah.
He wouldn't have even thought twice about it.
He's not violent, he's not overly aggressive.
He was a reasonable lad who went about his business apparently in the right way.
And, you know, once you got to know him, you could have a laugh and a joke. I've spent many a time at motocross meetings with him, you know, like socialising as you do, you know, having a drink after the race meetings and having a laugh and a joke about what's happened.
A week previous, David and his brother Derrick were up at the local scramble track with an off-road vehicle that David had just finished making. And they spent quite a bit of time that afternoon driving round and round, laughing their heads off, like you would expect warm brothers to do. There wasn't any underlying reason.
Somebody said, oh, it's Derrick Bird, it's a taxi driver. And I said, oh, no, we know the lad. Surely he hasn't been shot. And then they said, no, I think it's him that's done the shootings. And I said, oh, never.
So were you surprised when you found out it was him that had supposedly done these shootings then?
Absolutely gobsmacked.
Right.
Out of character.
You can't believe what's happened.
Let's now describe the official story, which most people probably accept as truth, with the help of Channel 4's documentary on the case, which did not uncover a single anomaly with the police investigation and did not seek to ask any probing questions about what really happened. It just reported the official story, as is always the case with mainstream TV.
He drove 3 miles east to the village of Lampla with a .22 rifle and a silencer. He knew access to his brother's home would be easy. What had driven Derrick Bird to kill his twin brother David? At 10 o'clock, Derrick Bird set off to kill his brother's solicitor. At 10:20, Derrick Bird shot dead Kevin Commons. Gunshots were heard and reported to the police. Into the busy town centre of Whitehaven.
2 really loud bangs. Seen there was a guy on the floor, lying down over there, on the floor, just behind the bins now.
Bird's first target is Darren Rewcastle. Taxi driver Don Reed is shot in the back. Heading away from the rank, Bird pulls over when he recognises another taxi driver, Paul Wilson.
There's Bird in his car, so I've basically walked over, I've ducked down to look in the car and bang, shot me straight away.
The 3 unarmed police officers chase Bird for a quarter of a mile. Then they witness his 4th shooting in Whitehaven.
I just seen the 2 barrels coming out the window, and as I turned, I just heard a bang. The taxi driver didn't know he had been hit till he turned around and looked at me. And then I took my jacket off, I looked and I was like, oh my God, I've been hit myself.
Bird speeds off through the market town of Egremont.
Got into the car, closed the door and just drove off down the hill into Egremont. It was only when I looked back up the hill that I saw there was his body slumped on the floor.
Susan Hughes, Kenneth Fishburne. He is shot dead just yards from his home. A few hundred yards further on, Derrick Bird sees Les Hunter.
And as I crouched down further, he fired the other barrel and right in the middle of my back.
Bird heads south out of Egremont and next sees 15-year-old Ashley Glaister.
Ducked down and then that's when he shot and I felt it go past my hair.
Just walk along the verge of the road and he just pulled up and shot him.
65-year-old Spike Dixon. Derrick Bird reaches Wilton. He then shoots the next people he sees. Jennifer Jackson and her husband James. By now, Derrick Bird is back on the main road. About 11:20, he sees a man trimming this hedge. Gary Purdom was 31 and a father of 2. But Derrick Bird will kill 3 more people in the next 15 minutes. The first is Jamie Clark, shot dead driving along in his smart car. Bird continues into Seascale. Harry Berger has been hit in the shoulder. He is very badly injured but is still alive. 26 seconds after Bird's Picasso has passed the CCTV camera, there are 2 more gunshots. Bird has shot dead Michael Pike. Moments after the death of Michael Pike, Bird kills Jane Robinson, shot yards from the home she shared with her twin sister. On a 2-mile stretch of road, there will be 6 more shooting incidents. Bird has shot at a campsite. He injures 4 more people in separate random shootings.
His tyre came off up there and he stopped there.
Derrick Bird has abandoned his taxi.
And then he'd gone down the lane and into the wood and shot himself.
I mentioned witnesses earlier, and we've seen a few already. From my research, of the 24 shooting locations, there were around 90 first-hand witnesses. Of these, I have been able to find 59 of them mentioned in mainstream media. I have had personal contact with 36 witnesses. Of these, 26 have given me information about what they saw. From my own witness accounts and from what has appeared in the mainstream media, I have ascertained that only 36 witnesses actually saw a gunman. And of these, 24 described the gunman in some way or other. Of these, 16 indicated that they thought it probably was Derrick Bird. Out of all the witnesses I have spoken to, the person who looked at the gunman's face for the longest period was witness Jill Culshaw, who was near the scene in C-scale of the 11th victim, Michael Pike. She states that the gunman was staring at her for between 30 seconds and a minute. Here is her statement.
That was on the news.
Right.
The picture of the man, it looked nothing like what I thought that I'd seen, if that makes sense.
Jill, can I ask that question on here and just record you saying that?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay, so I'm with...
It's on my police statement.
It's on your police statement, isn't it? Well, that's quite interesting. I'm with Jill Culshaw, and just tell us description of the vehicle and the person in the car.
It was a Citroen Picasso. It was either a light green or light bluey colour, one of those weird Citroen colours. I'd seen him approaching the back wheel of Mike's car with the left-hand wing, front wing, very, very slowly, and thought, what on earth is he doing, as you would do. And then I heard two noises. I didn't even know there was shotgun at the time. It was just two really loud bangs. Then it seemed like 30 seconds a minute, stirring at us, and then phew, off he went.
So he stared at you for 30 seconds at least?
At least, yeah.
Right. So you got a good look at him?
Yeah.
I've got two pictures of Derrick Bird here.
Yeah.
Because obviously what you've said contradicts the picture.
It does, yeah.
Right.
The person that I thought that I'd saw was probably late 20s and black spiky hair.
What was the length of the hair?
Probably inch and a half, spiked up.
Okay. Short dark hair, spiked up, in his late 20s. That's hardly a description of Derrick Bird, who had sandy hair, receding, and was 52. In the very first police report posted on the Cumbria Police website at 11 AM, we also have a description of a younger man. The police website read, "Police are currently searching for a dark grey silver Citroen Picasso driven by a man in his 30s with a shaven head believed to be involved." This statement was also read out on BBC Radio.
Armed police are looking for a man said to be in his 30s with a shaven head driving a dark grey or silver Citroen Picasso.
Interestingly, the Channel 4 documentary also used the same radio clip. Here it is, exactly as it appears in their documentary.
Armed police are looking for a man with a shaven head driving a dark grey or silver Citroen Picasso.
But hang on, let's play the original clip again.
Armed police are looking for a man said to be in his 30s with a shaven head driving a dark grey or silver Citroen Picasso.
And now the Channel 4 version.
Armed police are looking for a man with a shaven head driving a dark grey or silver Citroen Picasso.
So not only do we have two descriptions of a much younger man, but we see that mainstream television are withholding this from their documentary. The age being reported as in his 30s is close to what Jill Culshaw said, in his late 20s. Having discovered that a younger male may have been involved in these shootings, I wanted to get hold of the official inquest papers, which contain statements from all the witnesses. These statements might shed more light on whether a younger man was involved. In order to do this, I wrote to the coroner to request information and statements from the inquest, which I thought would be publicly available. After all, an inquest is open to the public. The coroner's office emailed me asking why I needed the information. I told them it was for a documentary which is seeking to give an accurate account of the events, therefore we need the inquest papers to be sure of our facts. The coroner, David Roberts, emailed me asking for further details about the documentary, such as who had commissioned it and which channel would it be aired on. I answered all of his questions, and after this he then refused to give me any information, stating, "Having considered the matter and the issues involved, I do not consider that you are a proper person within the meaning of Regulation 27. In the circumstances, I am not in a position to provide you with the documents you have requested. It seems my documentary hasn't been commissioned by the right organisation to warrant being given access to the inquest papers. Despite this, I set about carrying out further investigation and tried to track down witnesses myself. As you can imagine, this is not something you do lightly. Contacting witnesses who have seen people murdered with a firearm and asking them for statements is often met with refusal to cooperate.
You don't want to talk about it.
It has to be done with tact and patience.
I've come back to Cumbria to try and speak to some more of the Cumbria shooting witnesses, because as far as I'm concerned there is a huge question mark over the description of the gunman and also the description of the gunman's vehicle. If you read mainstream media, it was Derrick Bird in a Citroen Picasso taxi, and that's the end of it. But I have highlighted several anomalies in the evidence which suggests there may have been at least one other gunman who is described as being in his 20s with short dark hair. There are at least 52 witnesses that I've identified. I've got their addresses here, so I'm interested to know from these witnesses, what did the gunman look like and what vehicle was he in? All of the pink numbers on here represent witnesses and where they live, the 52 that I've managed to identify. So we've got a couple of witnesses who live in Kendal there. I've already knocked on the door of witness number 50, but he wasn't in. We've got witnesses in Ulverston, a couple there. I'm going to go to those next. And coming up, we've got obviously a lot of witnesses in Seascale where 3 people were killed. As I say, a lot of those witnesses haven't spoken or have not given statements to the media. And then coming up, the other major place was Egremont. Got a number of witnesses there, and obviously Whitehaven. So these are all witnesses, some of whom have spoken, some haven't. Get on the way to Ulverston.
After much perseverance, I managed to gather a significant number of testimonies and recorded a few interviews which we will look at in detail. I have identified 24 locations where a gun was fired, but of these there is only a tiny amount of CCTV evidence that has been made available. So let's look at CCTV evidence first and then come on to the witnesses after that. We have this piece of CCTV which is alleged to be Derrick Bird travelling south on the B5086 through Frizington just after 5 AM. Derrick Bird lived in Rowrah and would regularly travel this road from his house to get to Whitehaven for taxi jobs. Usually after this mini roundabout he would turn right along the B5294 heading for Whitehaven. People have suggested this image is evidence that Bird was staking out his second alleged victim, Kevin Commons, who lived in Frizington at Mowbray Farm. But Bird would travel this route every time he went to and from Whitehaven. So the CCTV image could just be proof that he was carrying out his normal taxi driving activities. I suspect the reason this clip has been released is because it shows his car within a few hundred yards of the turnoff for Mowbray Farm. He is alleged to have gone to Mowbray Farm 5 hours later, just after 10 AM along this road, to kill Kevin Commons, and there are no eyewitnesses who identified Derrick Bird at that second murder. There is an eyewitness to Bird driving along the Mowbray Farm lane at around 5 AM, which some have tried to put down to him staking out his victim. However, Bird had a meeting arranged with Kevin Commons for later that day, so it is possible he was just dropping off paperwork at his house prior to their meeting. The other CCTV evidence released is mainly filmed in Whitehaven. Before we look at it, I will explain the gunman's alleged route. He is alleged to have driven down Duke Street, stopped his car here at the beginning of the taxi rank, shot and killed Darren Rowcastle out of the passenger window, firing twice with a shotgun, then moved his car several feet further forward toward the other end of the rank, jumped out of the car leaving his vehicle in the road, pursued another victim on foot, fellow taxi driver Don Reed, who he shot with a rifle at point-blank range in the back, leaving him on the pavement. He then got back into the car and drove around the town centre one-way system and then back down Duke Street for a second time, this time stopping momentarily at the taxi rank to fire 2 shots out of the passenger window into a wall, luckily missing any people. He then sped off to another part of Whitehaven. So let's look at some CCTV of this. This piece of CCTV shows the gunman passing the taxi rank at some point before passing the rank for the final time. This may be immediately after the first shooting, or it could be from some time earlier. We're not exactly sure when this clip is from. It is claimed to show Derrick Bird with a gun. I would argue the image is not clear enough to be able to conclusively identify who it is, nor that there is a gun. This piece of CCTV shows the gunman's vehicle driving around the one-way system, presumably between the two incidents on Duke Street. And this video is the only CCTV available filmed when bullets are being fired. It is filmed from a different angle at the far west end of the street during the second approach down Duke Street. We see the gunman's car pull up here, and then people react to the shots fired out of the window into the wall. On this occasion, the gunman does not get out of the vehicle. If we were to view CCTV from this camera angle just 3 minutes earlier, we would see the gunman's vehicle pull up here, the gunman get out of the vehicle with a gun and pursue Don Reed up the street. However, CCTV from this camera has not been released for that time frame. In fact, there is no footage I've been able to find showing the gunman in the street in Whitehaven wielding a gun. This news article states images recorded by a surveillance camera are understood to show in high definition the exact moment Bird pumps bullets into the head of his 43-year-old colleague. The footage is so horrific it can never be shown to the public, say police. The camera, located directly opposite the taxi rank in the centre of Whitehaven, Cumbria, first focuses in on Bird as he beckons unsuspecting Mr. Rowcastle towards him. Then footage in full colour shows Bird exploding with rage as he blasts Mr. Rowcastle before turning his gun on Don Reed, said a source. The source is not named. The article goes on. Last night, Cumbria Police confirmed the Duke Street incident was captured by a 360-degree dome-style camera monitored by council staff at a dedicated central headquarters operation room. It also feeds live pictures into the control centre at Whitehaven Police Station. Both civilian operators and their police counterparts have the ability to move the camera and pan in on events, usually minor street disorders and public drunkenness. I am very suspicious about the accuracy of this article. Firstly, it says the camera focuses in on Bird as he beckons unsuspecting Mr. Rowcastle. Remember, no shots had been fired in Whitehaven at this point. Bird was not even a suspect. Why would the camera focus in on Bird just because he beckoned over a colleague? It then says Bird exploding with rage as he blasts Mr. Rowcastle. This is completely inconsistent with all of the other shootings where Bird was not in a rage. Remember, the gunman was sitting inside the car when he shot Rowcastle. Would a CCTV camera really pick up somebody exploding with rage inside their vehicle? Like I said, there appears to be no clear images available to the public showing Derrick Bird with a gun in his hand. If police have high-definition images from CCTV in Whitehaven, why haven't we seen them? Why have we not been given images of the gunman getting out of his car, which according to this article must exist? We would then be able to make some judgment, independent of what witnesses have claimed, as to the identity of the gunman. But so far, we rely wholly on eyewitnesses. The argument for the withholding of this CCTV is because of the sensitive nature of the images. This is a lame excuse, because we are not asking for images of any victims, only the gunman. Victims could easily be removed. And secondly, here is an image put out in our media of David Rathband, who was shot by Rowrah Moat just 1 month later. It seems the media and police only release images when it fits their agenda and not for the public benefit. Another anomaly to draw attention to is that in the image of the gunman's car passing the rank from the side, the vehicle appears to have a yellow sign on the roof. In none of the other images do we see a taxi sign on top of the car, including the one at 5 AM. Perhaps the gunman removed the taxi sign shortly before the assaults on the taxi rank. There are no eyewitnesses in Whitehaven to him removing the taxi sign from the roof. Could this point to a second vehicle being involved? Or could these images have been filmed on a previous day perhaps? We see no car at the front of the rank in this image, as would normally be the case at 10:30 on a weekday. Tuesday morning, you can see there, time is 10:37. The taxis move up in turn. I don't completely rule out a second Citroën Picasso, but out of all the witnesses I have so far spoken to, none of them remember seeing a taxi sign being on the roof of the gunman's vehicle that day. Because so little CCTV has been made available, we the public rely purely on what witnesses claim to have seen, which we will look at later. The CCTV from Duke Street continues on after the shooting and shows a member of the public, Paul Goodwin, in a black Ford Escort following the gunman's vehicle. He stops his car to allow a police officer to get in, then continues chasing the murderer. The gunman's car is then picked up on Scotch Street, where it pulls over at some traffic lights, stops momentarily when the driver then allegedly beckons taxi driver Paul Wilson, who was walking up the street. Wilson puts his head to the passenger window and is allegedly shot with a shotgun at point-blank range, but survives with just a scratch. We then see the car pull away, followed by Paul Goodwin and a police van. We see the vehicles again on another camera shortly after this. Almost an hour later, after killing a further 7 people, we see a very brief clip of the gunman's car captured 15 miles away at C-scale by a private CCTV system. And that just about sums up the total amount of CCTV evidence I've been able to find, which in itself proves almost nothing about who carried out these murders. We saw how one of the CCTV clips appeared to show a taxi sign on top of the vehicle, whereas in others, no taxi sign is present. I have no eyewitnesses of the vehicle having a taxi sign on it during the day in question. Interestingly, this mainstream media clip taken from a helicopter after Derrick Bird was killed seems to show a vehicle with a taxi sign on the roof. Could there have been 2 or more silver Citroen Picassos involved in these shootings, and therefore more than one gunman?